I moved into my apartment in March. It's a small one-bedroom on the second floor of an old building in Pittsburgh. The landlord said the previous tenant had been there for 8 years before moving out of state for work. Normal stuff. The rent was good, the neighborhood was quiet, and I was just happy to finally live alone after 2 years with roommates. The first weird thing happened maybe 3 weeks in. I came home from work around 6:30 p.m., and the kitchen faucet was running. Not dripping, running. A steady stream of cold water. I stood there for a second, trying to remember if I'd used it that morning. I had made coffee, but I was pretty sure I'd turned it off. I have this whole routine where I check the stove and the faucet before I leave because my mom drilled it into me as a kid. But I figured maybe I'd been distracted, half asleep, whatever. I turned it off and didn't think about it again. A week later, I noticed the bathroom light was on when I got home. I never use that light during the day. My apartment gets decent natural light from the windows, and I'm weird about conserving electricity. I definitely didn't leave it on. But again, I just thought I must have. People make mistakes. I'd been working overtime that week. I was tired. Then it was the deadbolt. I came home one evening and the deadbolt wasn't locked, just the handle lock. I always use both. Always. I even checked my keys in my hand to make sure I hadn't somehow forgotten to lock it that morning, but I distinctly remembered turning the key twice. I stood in the hallway for a minute, looking at the door, trying to convince myself I was misremembering my own routine. I checked the apartment. Nothing was missing. Nothing looked disturbed. I made myself a drink and turned on the TV louder than usual. The next morning, I locked both locks. I stood there and tested the deadbolt 3 times to make sure. I took a picture of it on my phone, which felt insane, but I needed proof for myself that I'd actually done it. When I came home that night, the deadbolt was unlocked again. I didn't call anyone. I didn't tell my girlfriend, who I'd just started seeing. What would I even say? I think I'm forgetting to lock my door. I thought maybe I was losing it. Stress, new job, new place. I read somewhere that people can have gaps in memory when they're anxious. So I started paying closer attention. I began noticing smaller things. The living room window blinds would be adjusted differently. I keep them at a specific angle because otherwise the street light shines directly into the room at night. Twice in 1 week they'd been moved. The shower curtain was pushed all the way to one side when I always leave it spread out so it dries evenly. A chair at my kitchen table was pulled out slightly. Each thing by itself meant nothing, but together they started to add up. I made a list in my phone. I didn't know what else to do. May 4th, faucet running. May 11th, bathroom light on May 14th, deadbolt unlocked. May 15th, deadbolt unlocked again. May 18th, blinds moved. May 19th, shower curtain. May 20th, kitchen chair. I started coming home during my lunch break, just to check. Everything was always fine. Locked, untouched, silent. I'd stand in my apartment for 10 minutes, looking around, feeling paranoid and stupid. Then I'd go back to work. On May 23rd, I stayed home sick. I wasn't really sick, I just needed a day. I spent most of it on the couch, half watching TV, half sleeping. Around 2 p.m., I got up to get water. That's when I noticed the smell. Cigarette smoke. Faint, but definitely there. I don't smoke. Nobody in my building smokes inside. It's in the lease. I checked the windows. All closed. I opened them to air the place out and told myself it must have drifted in from somewhere else, even though that didn't make sense. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the smell, about the door, about every small thing that had felt wrong. Around 1 a.m., I got up and walked through the apartment. I opened the closet in my bedroom, the one I barely use because it's full of boxes I haven't unpacked yet. I don't know why I opened it, but when I did, I noticed that the boxes had been moved, not dramatically, just shifted. One of them was turned a different direction. The dust pattern on the floor was disturbed. I closed the closet and got back into bed. I didn't sleep. The next day, I set up a test. I took a hair from my head and laid it across the doorframe of my bedroom closet, right at knee height where you wouldn't notice it unless you were looking. I'd seen it in a movie once. I felt like an idiot doing it. When I came home from work, the hair was gone. I sat on my couch for an hour staring at the closet door. Then I opened it and looked inside. Everything looked the same. Boxes, winter coats, a duffel bag I'd brought from my old place. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight, shining it into the corners. That's when I saw them. Shoe prints. Not mine. Smaller than mine and a different tread pattern. They were faint in the dust on the floor, near the back corner behind the boxes. I backed out of the closet and closed the door. I didn't look inside again. For 3 days, I didn't do anything. I went to work, I came home. I ordered takeout and stayed in the living room with the TV on until I was too tired to keep my eyes open. I didn't check the closet, I didn't set up any more tests. I just existed in the apartment like everything was normal because I didn't know what else to do. On the 4th day, I came home and there was a smell again. Not cigarette smoke this time, food. Something cooked. Pasta, maybe, or soup. It was faint like it had been hours ago, but it was there. I hadn't cooked anything in 2 days. I stood in my kitchen and opened the trash can. On top was a can. Campbell's chicken noodle soup. I don't eat canned soup. I didn't buy it. It wasn't there that morning. I left the apartment and sat in my car for 20 minutes. Then I went back inside, packed a bag, and drove to my girlfriend's place. I told her I had a leak in my apartment and needed to stay over while maintenance fixed it. She said, of course. I stayed there for 4 days. When I finally went back, I called my landlord from the parking lot and told him I needed to break my lease. He wasn't happy, but I paid the penalty. I moved out 2 weeks later. Here's the thing I didn't tell anyone, not even my girlfriend. On my last day in that apartment, I was packing up the kitchen and I needed a box from the bedroom closet. I hadn't opened it since the shoe prints, but I needed the box. So I opened the door. Way in the back, behind everything, there was a blanket I didn't recognize. It was folded neatly, tucked into the corner, and next to it was a half-full bottle of water and a phone charger plugged into the outlet back there. The outlet I didn't know existed because I'd never moved the boxes far enough to see it. I closed the closet, took my car keys, and left. I didn't take anything else with me. I told the landlord to keep whatever was in there. He texted me a week later asking if I wanted my security deposit mailed to my new address. I said yes. He said the apartment was clean, everything looked fine, no damage. He said the next tenant was moving in that weekend. I didn't respond. Sometimes I think about texting him to ask if that tenant is still there, but I never do. I don't want to know. This happened 3 years ago when I was living in Portland. At the time, I worked late shifts at a call center downtown, usually getting off close to midnight. To save money, I'd started walking home instead of taking the bus. It was about a 25-minute walk through mostly residential streets, and after a few weeks, it felt routine enough that I stopped thinking twice about it. That night was a Tuesday in October. I remember because I'd skipped my lunch break to cover someone's shift and didn't clock out until around 11:40 p.m. The air was cold and damp, the kind that seeps into your clothes and makes your breath visible. I had my headphones on, but no music playing. I wore them purely so people wouldn't try to talk to me. After a few uncomfortable encounters near the bars, it felt safer that way. The first part of the walk was completely normal. I passed closed storefronts, a couple waiting on a ride, a man walking his dog. Nothing out of place. When I turned onto Hawthorne, the streetlights became more spaced out, leaving long pockets of darkness between them. That's when I noticed the footsteps. They were behind me, not rushed, not dragging. Heavy shoes, probably boots, about 20 feet back, moving at the same pace I was. At first, I didn't care. It's a city sidewalk. People walk behind you all the time. But after 2 blocks, they were still there. Same rhythm, same distance. I slowed down just slightly, barely noticeable, just enough to test it. The footsteps slowed down too. That was the first time I felt that tight, uncomfortable drop in my stomach. I told myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were distracted. Maybe they were just walking home too. I kept going, focusing on my breathing and the sound of my own steps. At the next intersection, I crossed the street even though I didn't need to. My apartment was straight ahead, but I crossed anyway and stopped at the corner like I was checking my phone. When I looked back, I saw him. He was tall, wearing a dark jacket with the hood pulled up. His hands were in his pockets. He stood under a streetlight that flickered and barely worked, so I couldn't see his face clearly, just his outline. He wasn't walking. He was standing still, watching me. We stayed like that for a few seconds. Then, without hesitation, he crossed the street too. My heart started pounding. I put my phone away and started walking faster. I didn't look back this time, but I could hear him. Closer now. The space between the streetlights felt longer here, the houses darker. Most windows were black. I kept thinking, don't go home. Don't lead him there. The coffee shop on the corner was closed. The convenience store a block up was dark. The only place I knew that stayed open late was a diner 6 blocks away, but that meant staying on these empty streets even longer. I turned down a side street I never used. So did he. This time, there was no doubt. His footsteps got heavier, faster, like he wasn't bothering to hide it anymore. I could hear his breathing now, faint but close. The street was completely empty. No cars, no voices. Just us. I passed a parked car and saw our reflections in the window. He was closer than I thought. Maybe 10 feet back. His shoulders were slightly hunched, like he was leaning forward as he walked. Then he spoke. "Hey." Just one word. Quiet. Casual. I didn't turn around. I didn't answer. I kept walking. "Hey, wait up." He was closer now. Too close. I started jogging. My lungs burned from the cold air, and I could hear him speed up behind me. Not running, but fast enough that I knew I couldn't keep this up for long. I turned left, then right, trying to lose him, trying to get closer to a main road. That's when I saw a house with every light on. Porch light, living room, even an upstairs window glowing. I ran up the driveway and pounded on the door. When I looked back, he was standing at the edge of the driveway. The porch light reached just far enough to show part of his face, but his hood kept most of it hidden. His mouth was visible. He wasn't smiling. He wasn't angry. He was just watching me. The door opened and an older man stood there, confused and irritated. "Please," I said. "Someone's following me." He looked past me toward the street. The man was gone. The couple let me inside. They gave me water and let me call a cab. They were kind, but I could tell they didn't fully believe me. The husband even stepped outside to check the street and came back shaking his head. "There's nobody out there," he said. The cab arrived 15 minutes later. I gave the driver an address a few blocks past my apartment and walked the rest of the way, checking behind me every few steps. I didn't sleep that night. 2 days later, when I was leaving for work in the afternoon, I noticed something tucked under my windshield wiper. It was a receipt, old and faded. From a convenience store a few blocks from the route I usually walked home. The timestamp was from the night it happened. On the back, written in pencil with heavy pressure, were 4 words. "You got home safe. I still have it. I moved 6 months later. I don't walk alone at night anymore, but sometimes when I'm driving home after dark, I notice a car a few lengths behind me. Same speed, same turns, and I don't wait around to see who's driving.